So my younger sister had her first baby before we did. And I remember that when the kid was a toddler, they got into this terrible routine of every time when they put him to bed, one of them had to lay in the bed with the kid before he would fall asleep. Some of you do these kinds of things, don't you? And we'd be over at their house for dinner or something at like 7:30. They'd go to put him to bed and never come back because they'd fall asleep with the kid. And so I promised myself that whenever we had kids, I'd be a more disciplined and organized and together parent than that. Well, sure enough, we had our first son, and at first when they're in a crib and you put them to bed, that works fine because they're all caged in, like they're in prison and they can't get out. But then when he was a toddler, we wanted to get him his own bed, and like 2 years old. But then the problem is you go to leave the room and they jump out of bed and follow you. And so I thought, okay, I'll just get a chair and sit next to him. And so I started getting a chair and sitting right next to the bed, and then he would fall asleep. But the problem is we had wood floors, and you'd go to stand up and they would creak, and he'd wake up, hey, sit back down. And sometimes it'd take 45 minutes, and there's a football game you want to watch. So finally I read a book, and the book said you have to back your way out of the room. Each night, over a week, get further and further away from the bed. And so I was doing that until finally I was way on the other side of the room by the door. Okay, and I'm sitting in the doorway, and the bed's way over there. And he says, Dad, come sit next to me. Bring the chair. He said, why are you way over there, Dad? And I said, well, if I come sit by you, we'll be doing this till you're 18 years old. And he says, Dad, just bring the chair and come over by the bed. And I said, no, I have to stay over here. And then he starts to cry, and he's crying these big crocodile tears. And he's saying, please, Dad, just come closer, come closer. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore, so I just got the chair and went back by the bed and thought we'd figure out that later. Do you see why I say your presence is a gift? It's one of the great gifts that God has given you to the people that you love and care about around you. Jesus knew this. We've been making our way through the book of Mark in this series as we've talked about the gift of people. And Jesus knew that his presence with the people that he cared about was a gift. So look at this. This is Mark chapter 6, verse 31. Because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have time to eat, Jesus said to them, these are to his friends, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. How do you like that? Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Jesus knew that his presence, just focusing on the ones that he cared about the most, his presence was a gift. Your presence is like that. Some say that your presence is the most powerful force in the universe, that when you are present with the ones that you care about, it makes a huge difference in their life. We all long for the presence of people that we care about in our lives. We need people around us. For example, in Oregon, there's a small coastal city called Gold Beach, Oregon. And it's such a small town that they have a volunteer fire department. And not too long ago, they wanted to raise money with a pancake breakfast for their fire department. And so they put flyers up all over town. And the flyers simply said, you come to our pancake breakfast and we'll come to your fire. You see that? If you are present when we need you to be present, then we'll be present when you need us most. I want to start with this idea as I challenge you to be present more. I think it starts with this. It starts by being present in this moment. I think the opposite of being present is to be absent, if you think about that with me. And absence, especially people that we care about, when they're absent, it really hurts. Maybe you've invited a friend to join you like at a Christmas party and they don't even show up. Maybe they don't even return the invite. It kind of hurts. It's not just that you wish they were there, but their absence hurts because we long to be close to the people that we love. And people, that's why I say you are a gift to others. Your presence matters. But the invitation today is to be present in this moment. I think we dread the absence of people that we care about and love. When I say that, I think about Jordan, who was playing drums here with the Afters. I hadn't seen him and Matt in a while, and I was speaking at Arizona Christian University on Thursday and met them there. They were doing music. And as soon as I said hi, I said, hey, how have things been? The first thing he says, it's been incredible, Palmer. You know we had our first baby 8 months ago. And I said, that's right. And so right away he whips out his iPhone and he has a picture of his baby Rosie. We have a picture on the screen here. This is Rosie. And he says, isn't she beautiful? I said, yes, Jordan, she's perfect. And he said this has been the best 8 months of my life. And I said, I know, isn't it incredible being a parent? And then he said this, but this trip to Arizona, it's my first time since she was born that I've been away from Rosie. He said, I can't stand it. It's driving me crazy. He said, so I've been FaceTiming her every day. I said, Jordan, she's 8 months old. Can she really know it's you? He says, oh, no, she knows. She lights up when she sees me. And then he's showing this same iPhone to everyone he meets, whether he knows them or not. I watched him do this. And he's showing it to my wife, and then he says, he's flipping through a bunch of pictures now. He said, I need a new iPhone. I run out of storage on this one. I've taken so many pictures of Rosie. You see, one day for Jordan, one day away from Rosie is too many. It's too much. The problem is, I think sometimes we, rather than are being present in this moment with the ones who matter most, sometimes we try to skim and skip on our relationships. If you think about your own life, maybe you've been skipping through your own existence because you have so many emails and texts to respond to, you have so many options for entertainment and social media that you aren't fully present with the ones that you love most. And so I want to start with this idea, to start this practice of being present in this moment. I think sometimes we get caught up in the past, or sometimes we think so much about the future that we fail to be present in this moment. Worry and stress and anxiety. Worry and anxiety, they say, come from not being present in this moment, but thinking so much about the future. Regret comes when you think so much about the past and wishing you were there instead of where you are right now and giving yourself completely to the ones that you love most. Jesus says this, if you want to turn back in your Bibles a few pages to Matthew chapter 6, he says, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Today has enough trouble of its own. If you are consumed with tomorrow, or if you are consumed with the past and living with regrets, but if you're consumed with tomorrow, then you can't give yourself fully to what you're doing right now. You can't be completely present with the ones that you're with right now. You can't completely enjoy the work you're doing right now if you keep thinking about tomorrow or thinking about the past. You can't completely enjoy the people that you're present with today. So this idea of your presence being a gift, I think it starts by knowing that this moment requires you being fully present here. Then I want to say this next. I think this is a prerequisite to realizing that your presence is a gift, to know that your life is a gift. God has given you a one and a very important life. And I think sometimes we miss that he put you here as a living, breathing miracle from him. And you are one in a million. There's no one else like you with your abilities and passions and the things that you do. The Bible, when you read the Bible, we keep reading that God talks about you not just as his child, but as his precious child. Here's how Moses says it in Exodus chapter 3, verse 5. He says, you are God's precious treasure. The Hebrew people, that language, precious treasure, in Hebrew, the word is segula. To the Jewish people, this is a very important word. They even named their daughters Segula. Segula means precious treasure, and that's, I think, how God sees you. In fact, I think God, when he looks down from heaven, he sees you like that. I think, this is just my conjecture, I think God might have an iPhone in heaven, and his screensaver, instead of Jordan having Rosie on it, God has you on it. And I think he walks around heaven with your picture on his screen saying, let me tell you about Brenda. She's amazing. She's beautiful. And she's talented. Isn't she beautiful? I think God brags about you like that. I was looking at some child sponsorship packets recently, and I picked one up, and this girl was from Ghana. And I looked at her name was Precious. And I thought, well, who's not gonna sponsor her? You think maybe your life is not a gift. And I just wanna say that you're wrong. That God has made you unique and good. And maybe you think it doesn't matter whether you're at the Grove some Sundays or not. And I just wanna say it really does matter. Maybe on some Sundays you wanna stay home and maybe you wanna watch the Rams or something like that. But when you do, you think church just goes on as normal? No, what happens is we look around, we go, oh, Bob's not here today, stayed home to watch the Rams. And so we just say, it's no good, we're just all gonna go home. So we leave. When you're not here, nobody's here. That's how important you are, you don't believe me. But your presence matters and is a gift to those who love you most. When I say that, I think about a few years ago, we had our first Thanksgiving without one of my 4 sons. We never had that before, but he was going to grad school up in Oregon. And so we sat down for dinner, and I thought it would just be a normal dinner, but right away his brothers start talking about him. And they start telling his stories, and they start talking about all the ridiculous things he did in high school and how he got suspended for some of them. And then we're laughing about him and laughing about the nicknames he had for the different neighbor kids and things like that. And then it got really quiet, and everybody stopped talking because we knew that dinner wasn't right. We knew that Thanksgiving wasn't the same because he was missing. We needed his presence. Sometimes when you meet people, all they talk about are their mistakes that they made in life. And they're trying to make excuses for the way things are in their life. And they start making excuses for their failures and for their losses and things like that. And I think what they miss is that is not what is most important about you. What is most important about you is not your mistake or your loss or your broken heart, or your heartache. The thing that must be said about you first, above everything else, is that you are a gift. And that leads me to this. This is where we started. If you can see yourself as a gift from God, then you will know that your presence is a gift from God to others around you. And that's where we've been heading this morning. As I say that, I think about one of my really good friends, one of my closest friends in the world. His name is Mawolo. And Mawolo is from Liberia, but we both ended up in Malawi before I moved to Chandler, and we're teaching at African Bible College. And while I was there, I got malaria. I've had malaria like half a dozen times, but this time it hit me hard. It's what they call +4 malaria. That's almost as bad as it gets. When you get malaria, you feel like you're gonna die. As an adult, you probably won't. It's all gonna be okay. But you sure feel like you're gonna die. You're delirious, you're running a high fever, you're on chloroquine, and the room is spinning. And I remember that night, so my wife checked me into a small Malawian clinic, and it was getting late, it was like 9 o'clock, so she said, hey, it's Christmas Eve, I have to go home and hang stockings and take care of the boys, you know that. So, but just as she's leaving, and I'm saying it'll be okay, Irving, my Liberian friend, walked in. He's like a brother from another mother. And he walks in, and he's carrying in his hands a Scrabble board, and he walks over to my bed and pulls up this big hard wooden chair, and he sits down next to my bed with a Scrabble game. I said, Irving, why'd you bring Scrabble? He said, I thought we'd play Scrabble tonight. I said, Irving, man, I can't even see straight. The whole room's spinning. And I'm about to pass out from the fever. I'm sweating. And he said, well, and plus I didn't want to play Irving because you'll lose every time. Irving, when he was a refugee from the Liberian War, he took a Scrabble game with him. This is a true story, and the Scrabble dictionary, and he's memorized every word. This is true. Every word that starts with X and Z. So you will always lose to Irving. So I'm sweating in bed, and he's sitting there, and we visit a little bit. Mostly Irving's talking. And finally I said, I said, Mawoli, you can go. It's like 10:30 or 11. He said, Palmer, he said, I'm not leaving. I said, well, there's not even another bed here. You can go. I'll be fine. He says, I'm not going home until you go home. I said, well, what are you going to do all night? He said, I'm going to stay right here in this chair. And so Irving said, I woke up maybe at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning in some malaria fog, and Irving was just sitting there, not sleeping, not closing his eyes, just making sure I was okay. The next morning, Irving and I left and went home together on Christmas Day. You see, I think your presence, maybe it even has healing power when friends like Irving sit next to you. And I say all that to say that this morning, I want to invite you to start giving your presence to the people that you care about and love the most. There's something, when I talk about presence, there's a word that goes with it, and it's the word attention. Attention is this idea. It's the cognitive process of focusing on one thing or one person while ignoring everything else in the world, ignoring all the text and all the emails, ignoring the noise and the music and other people, and focusing. That's attention, is when you focus on just one person, one thing. And it says, when you focus on them, it says, I love you, or I care about you, or you're the most important person in the world right now. Sometimes we try to split our attention, don't we? It's like texting and driving. You're going to die. I'm glad we're going to have, if you keep doing that, I'm glad we're going to have an Arizona law soon, I think. But sometimes I'll be talking to my millennial staff, and then they'll get a text, and while we're in the middle of the conversation, they'll start to text back. So I just stop talking, and they'll go, oh, Palmer, keep talking. I can listen and text at the same time. I go, no, you can't. We're horrible at that. You really can't split your attention. Jesus, I think, paid attention like nobody else in the world, especially to kids. Kids need our attention, but so do our adults. But it starts by giving our attention to kids. Look at this, Matthew chapter 19. So some kids are coming toward Jesus. The disciples are trying to beat him away with a stick, saying, don't pay attention to them. And Jesus says, let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. He knew that kids need our attention desperately. I remember walking into our house one day after work, and our 4 boys were still small, and one was like 3 years old, and he runs up, meets me at the door, and he says, do you want to play hi-ho Cheerio? Can I see all the hi-ho Cheerios here, everyone? All right. And so I said, sure. So I follow him into the family room, and he gets down on the carpet with hi-ho Cheerio, and I just sit on the edge of the couch, and he looks up at me, and he shakes his head, and he's down here, and he starts patting on the carpet, and he says, come sit down here, Dad. Come down here. And then as soon as I got down on the carpet, I'm down next to him, and he says this. He points at my feet. He says, take off your shoes, Dad. Take off your shoes. And so I took my shoes off, because he knew that if I took off my shoes, then I wouldn't try to go mow the lawn or wash the car or go to Home Depot or do something dumb like that, instead of just being present with him. Sometimes we try to split our attention, and it just doesn't work. And when you think about him saying, take off your shoes, it reminds me of God and Moses. The first time that Moses meets God, God says to him, take off your shoes, doesn't he? No, he said the ground is holy, but I think he just wanted Moses to stay for a little while. Little kids often say things like, watch me, don't they? And they'll do a somersault, they'll jump off a couch. But I think even as adults, as we get older, we say things like, watch me, do you see me, do I matter? One last kid story. All my sons had soccer games at Santan Legacy one Saturday morning, and I was exhausted. We had jumped from field to field to field to watch 4 different games. And by the way, my sons were really good. You just need to know that. And Every dad says that. Anyway, but that day, I think they all scored goals. And so we're sitting in the family room. There's 3 of the older ones there. We're watching a football game, and I start going around. I said, Spencer, I couldn't believe you scored a goal with your left foot. And Byron, you scored 2 goals. And Christian, you scored the game-winning penalty kick. It was a crazy Chinchen day. And I praise all 3 of them that are sitting there with me. But the 5-year-old wasn't in the room. I didn't know where he was. And then I hear from around the corner down the hall, he was playing with action figures. He says, "How about me, Dad?" I think a lot of us go through life saying, "How about me?" The people you care about and love in life, they say, "How about me?" Are you giving them your full attention? I say your attention is a gift, and it's not just to your children or not even just to your husband or to your wife. It's to your friends. Your presence is a gift to the people that you work with. Think about it with me. I believe that God put you in your place of work every day to be a blessing to those people, because the presence of Christ in your life pours out of you, and your presence becomes a blessing and a gift to everyone that you share an office with and work with. Because when you walk into the office, you bring the presence of Christ, and that means you bring integrity with you to work. That means with your presence, you bring compassion. With your presence, you bring honor and respect for every person in the workplace, regardless of their title. It means that you come into your workplace and your presence, you bring peace. You become a peacemaker, and people start to see Christ in your life. That's why I say your presence is a gift. I want to end this morning with one final thought, and it's this invitation to dwell in the presence of God. When you read the Bible, you realize that the soul longs for the presence of God, that God made us with this deep longing for him in our lives. You know Psalm 23 well, but I want to read a few lines from it. This is not the whole psalm, but it's a few lines that talk about his presence with us. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Reading the Bible, you understand quickly that the Bible is not most about human beings, people, you and me. It's not about our desire to be with God. But when you read the Bible, you realize it's most about God's desire to be with us. From the opening pages of Genesis, we read about God taking walks in the garden with Adam and Eve. And we read he walks with Enoch. God was always wanting to be with his people. Then you read about Jesus Christ. And even his name, Emmanuel, is this: the with us God is what his name means, Emmanuel. God's desire to be with us. We see it in Jesus. And then Jesus says, "I'm leaving, but I'm leaving you my Spirit." And the Holy Spirit, he says, will be with you always. God's great desire is to be with you. The question is, will you start to dwell and live in the presence of God every moment of every day, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night? There's a 5th century bishop by the name of St. Patrick's. You know the name well. And he's written a prayer. It's called St. Patrick's Evening Prayer. I want to close by all of us together making this our prayer. So would you stand with me? And the words are on the screen here. And can I invite you to read these and make this prayer your prayer? Can we do it together out loud? Are you ready? Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ above me, Christ below me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me, Christ in the heart of every person who thinks of me, Christ when I lay down, Christ when I arise, Christ be all around me. Thank you, church.